Since 2003, this is the Sports Source, East Tennessee's #1 sports talk show.
Presented by Pipe Wrench, and by Junk Be Gone, and by the Garza Law Firm.
With your host, John Pennington. The Sports Source starts now.
Good Sunday morning and welcome into the Junk Be Gone studios here for the Sports Source. We appreciate you joining us as you have all year, as you have for the last 20 years. The Vols get a surprisingly easy rout of Vanderbilt on a rainy Nashville night last night, 56-0. I honestly didn't see that one coming, but if we've learned anything this season, it's that you can't make many conclusions from one week that draw over to the next week. We're going to talk about Tennessee's bowl outlooks, the scenarios. We've been debating that before this show started. It's confusing if you go through the SEC's bylaws and how teams go where. We'll break all that stuff down. We'll also talk about, obviously, this season as a whole, in addition to last night's game. But how will this year be remembered? For the exhilarating highs or the one devastating low? Will it be the season everything turned around for Tennessee, or will it be the season where, what might have been? That'll be one of our big topics. We got a lot of them. Let's get into it. First segment of today's program is brought to you by the Garza Law Firm. When it comes to East Tennesseans, we tend to trust our own. I grew up here. I know that mentality. And it certainly makes sense when it comes to finding an attorney, because you want someone who understands and knows the East Tennessee judicial systems better than somebody from outside. Marcos Garza and the team at the Garza Law Firm do that. They know East Tennessee. They know the judicial systems here. And here's the thing. They can help you wherever you are across East Tennessee. They just opened a new office in Jacksboro, as a matter of fact. So if you're watching this show here in East Tennessee and you have a legal need, the group to call is right there. Garza Law. GarzaLaw.com to learn more. All right. Here are the guys that I call every week to start our show. I can already tell. I apologize. I'm already stumbling over my words. That's what happens when they play a night game and I'm up till 4:30. Thank God the season is not going to give me any more night games. I hate the end of football season, but I'm glad the night games are gone. Jimmy Himes from 99.1 The Sports Animal. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Josh Ward from 99.1 The Sports Animal. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Former Virginia Tech coach, former NFL player, former college player, Justin Hamilton. Thank you for being here.
Thanks, John.
Right there. Thank you, Bob Hodge, for joining us as we wrap up our 20th season of doing this together. It's been a long time. 20 years.
I'm not even that old.
I know. All right. The Vols bounced back, as I said, in a huge way. They lost their shot at a national title. They lost their quarterback. It was a week of rumors and reports on potential issues in the locker room. And yet they romp Vanderbilt 56-0. 1 week after giving up 63 points and looking lost, they come out and pitch a shutout against a team that scored 31 points against Florida the week before. Go figure. I'll lead off simply by saying, if I've got to make a big takeaway, my lead story, kudos to the coaching staff. The players had to get out there and get it done. I didn't think the coach – we knew this would be a challenge for this staff to get this team up in the face of all that. The fact that you came out and won it 56-0, I think that says a lot about Josh Heupel and the guys on that staff. That's my lead story. Justin Hamilton, what's your lead story?
10-win season. And I know it wasn't what the fans or the coaches or the players, the way that you got those 10 wins, it's not what everyone wanted, the way they wanted it to look, but 10 wins are hard to come by. The 10-2 regular season is an awesome accomplishment, great memories here that people will be able to cherish for a long time.
Especially in the SEC, as we're going to look at the standings later. There weren't any bad teams, really.
It's when as a conference, you pound your chest about how good your conference is. It's really hard to win 10 games in that league, and it's hard for people to continue to do it. So it was a great season for Tennessee overall.
There were years in the SEC where you had dogs that would go 1-11, 2-10. Everybody's at 500. Everybody. It's a tough league to win 10 games. Jimmy, what's your takeaway?
A bounce back. You gave up 63 points to South Carolina. You gave up 9 touchdowns on 10 full possessions. Your defense played awful. Your offense couldn't keep up with them in the second half. You're without your starting quarterback, a Heisman Trophy candidate. You go into that game with a ton of injuries. You don't have 2 of your best receivers. And you overcome all this. Kirk Herbstreit picked Vanderbilt to win the game. That's what he thought of what was going on. So I think to overcome all of that, the suspension of Jeremy Banks and all the turmoil that was going on, for you to come back and play that well after getting beat by South Carolina, I think that says a whole lot about this football team, the players and the coaches.
Josh Ward, what's your big lead story takeaway?
I would say the way that Tennessee ran up the score, because that's what they did to Vanderbilt. And part of that is they wanted to make a statement, I think, coming out of how last week's game went, talking about what you mentioned after the game. Josh Heupel called it a culture win for Tennessee, but running the football. Last week on the show, we said the offense got out of rhythm. They couldn't run it. Well, they had a new quarterback in there. It wasn't Hendon Hooker. They needed other players to step up, and all the running backs stepped up and ran all over Vanderbilt.
2 touchdown runs of more than 50 yards, 2 others of more than 80 yards, more than 11 yards per carry, which I think is a school record. They had, nearly 400 yards rushing. And you did it behind an offensive line that was makeshift as well. So
in ugly conditions.
Yeah, you shut Vanderbilt out with a makeshift secondary. It was like a triage unit out there. And then offensively, you run all over them with a makeshift offensive line. Everything they lacked at South Carolina in terms of want to was apparent last night. Bob Hodge, lead story takeaway.
Boy, I guess it's me, Mr. Negative, huh?
Well, you are in all black.
My lead story, my big takeaway is simply, is Joe Milton the guy to lead this offense next year to get you back close to where you've been this year? And I watched the game last night, and I know it was windy, and I know it was rainy. It wasn't windy and rainy last year when he started the season, and I saw the exact same thing last night that I saw last year. He's got open receivers. He doesn't hit them. He's got guys that are a nice little touch pass, let him run under it, and you throw it 1,000,000 miles an hour, and it's not even close. So coming out of this game, my thing is worrying about Milton going into next year. And they said before the game on television, they said, well, now he really knows the offense. Not doubting it for a second, but you got to be able to perform with what you know. Finding the open guy, reading it correctly, you got to connect with him too. And I saw the same guy that I saw last year.
The pass, he was 11 of 21, 147 yards, 1 touchdown. No picks, I'll give him that. No rushing yards. The pass that bothered me the most, the deep rocket shots down the sideline, those aren't high percentage throws anyway. That's a tough one. The one to Princeton fan across the middle, look, you just lay it out there for him and let him run under it. I agree with Bob. I got concerns about Joe Milton. I hope he, nothing against the young man, but there is a world of drop off from Hendon Hooker to Joe Milton.
And they talk about how hard he works. I'm sure that's true. But when the lights come on, you got to be able to be more accurate. And that's what I don't see out of him.
Go ahead.
There'll be games where you're not going to run for 360 yards against Georgia and Alabama and a bunch of others.
And you'll face more pressure from those teams than Vanderbilt.
Right, and so your quarterback's going to have to make some plays
You had
in the passing game.
You had 14 offensive points in the first half against Vandy.
I was just going to say, when you have one of the unfortunate things about having a quarterback like the way Hendon Hooker has played is any quarterback is going to be a drop-off. And I know we've seen Joe Milton in the past, but when you have a guy that's played like Hendon Hooker's played, the next guy coming in, that's difficult shoes to fill.
Tough comparison.
I sit there and watch it and think, okay, the last 20 seconds against Alabama, accurate throws that you had to have to be able to win that game, can he do that sort of thing? And that's my big question.
A couple of other points to throw out here. One, there were people all week that said that team quit last week. They were mad, so they threw the game and all this stuff. It couldn't just be the one guy being out. Couldn't have made that difference. If you watch the intensity they played with last night with Jeremy Banks back out there, Sterling said last week, can't win without your soul. They looked like they had their soul back yesterday. He was directing traffic. He was out there getting people in the right spots. There was none of the confusion. Now, that wasn't as good a game plan as what South Carolina had. But, and I don't know that they played the right quarterback, although when they went to their passer, it didn't make much difference. But I think you saw a big difference. I don't know that Jeremy Banks was all the difference, but I think you can put a lot of that on the fact they didn't have their signal caller.
He gets a delay penalty for simulating the snap when he's trying to get at one of his own guys' attention.
He's talking to a DB, yeah.
His head's turned around. They're getting ready to snap the ball, and you're still working with your guys to make sure that everybody's on the same page.
That's an interesting rule, by the way.
Josh Heupel said in the postgame, our competitive spirit wasn't dialed in last week against South Carolina. That sounds a lot like Sterling said last week, you can't win without your soul. Yeah. I think Jeremy Banks, now, does that mean you throw some of the blame at him for South Carolina? Yeah, I think it does, but you have to give him credit for last night because it looks like a different defense with him out there. Mm-hmm. The other thing I wanted to put out there, I'm a big Josh Heupel fan. I liked the hire when they made it, but he opened last night talking about people questioning the culture in the locker room and how wrong it was for anybody to question. We've praised the culture. We've done segments where we talked about what the culture turnaround has been. So he wasn't talking to us. So I'm not mad that he talked to us. I'm just sitting there thinking, you could have put some of this to bed if you just answered the questions. Don't cry that rumors are out there. If you're asked a question, you say, well, we're not going to get into that. Hey, it's either or here. You don't get to play it both ways. I'm not going to tell you. Now, don't don't whisper about what it might be. No, that's not how it works. Not at Tennessee, not in the SEC. So I thought that was a little disappointing that he had to come out and tisk people when you had every opportunity to say it was a violation of team rules. We're moving on. It wasn't a fight. The culture's fine. You could have handled it. You didn't. So don't come out and scold people for wondering. Am I wrong on that?
No, in Knoxville especially, there's a lot of whispering. So you have to prepare for that ahead of time.
The only thing as a devil's advocate that I'll say is as a coach, sometimes the truth is stranger than fiction. And sometimes telling the truth is worse than letting people speculate. Sometimes.
Just
not
don't
always.
Tell somebody that if somebody fell on a helmet. That's what it is.
And I understand the part of protecting your player. I get that. But if you suspended him, and we all know that he did, just come out and say it was a violation of team rules. You don't have to be specific.
Yeah.
So I think he could have handled it better.
I do too. And that's the only thing I didn't like about him coming out last night. It's like they gave you every opportunity to stop the rumors. Okay? All right. Let me tell you what's coming up here. In the weeks ahead, we're here to the holiday season. The football season's over, but our season isn't. Mark Pankratz returns next week. We'll be talking basketball. We'll be talking recruiting. We'll be talking bowl outlook because we'll figure that out next Sunday. On the 11th, we've done 1,000 shows in 20 years, and I've never missed one. I'm missing one. Josh Ward's going to host the show in a couple of weeks. Guaranteed to be the best show that you've ever seen. I'm ready for your tweets saying, don't come back. We'll be talking basketball, recruiting, and bowl and Heisman reaction. You guys will have that. The week after that, hoops, recruiting, football, and bowl latest. Christmas Eve, 1 p.m. Christmas Eve, 90 minutes. That'll be our holiday blowout and our 2022 review. And then, depending on what UT's bowl is, either a bowl preview or a bowl review on January 1st. We'll be here New Year's Day at 11 a.m. as normal. All right, here's what's coming up on today's show. Will this season be remembered for the highs or the one low? Are coaching changes necessary? There's some people who say you've got to make some changes, even though you finished 10-2. UT's bowl outlook. Ranking the 2022 SEC teams. What season did UT have? Was it the second best, third best? Where was it? Will Heupel regret the choice he made of not playing Jeremy Banks at South Carolina? All that is coming up. But when we come back, what did we learn about the Vols, this program, this staff, on and on and on, these players in the 2022 season? That's next. Come on back on the Sports Source.